From the California State Senate, this is Senate Spotlight.
Hello there, and welcome to this edition of Senate Spotlight, where we discuss the legislative priorities, policy, and other related issues with members of the California State Senate. From the state capitol in Sacramento, I'm Brian Green, and our guest this time around is State Senator Leland Yee, representing the 8th Senate District here in California, San Francisco and San Mateo counties, and also the newly minted chair of the Senate Human Services Committee. Welcome, Senator. Happy New Year.
Thank you for having me. Happy New Year to you.
Glad to have you here. Obviously, you're starting a new legislative session here in January, February 2013, the largest number of newcomers in the Senate and the Assembly, freshmen in a generation. But also, you and your colleagues in the Democratic caucus have a supermajority here in the Senate and the Assembly. What does that mean to legislating and governing here for this new year?
Well, clearly having a supermajority gives the Democrats extraordinary power. We now have the ability to pass things with a two-thirds majority, and so that's extraordinary in terms of the power. But I think with that power comes tremendous responsibility, that it is extremely important that whatever we do with that particular power, we do it in light of trying to help children and families and seniors, those individuals who are in need of help, but also very, very conscious that there are other elements within our society, the business community and other communities, that we all need to kind of work together to come to a common goal for all of us.
And I assume, hopefully, as a lot of your colleagues have said here in this new year, meaning not so much crisis management as has been in the past, but maybe some actual, I don't want to say results, but just some actual focus forward, too.
Well, you know, I think that many pundits have argued that with the supermajority, just watch out for more taxes, more fees, and I don't think that that necessarily is the case. It's really more of just trying to then figure out what are the difficulties, what are the problems within the state, and how can we manage the state a lot better, maybe with more revenues, but also how do we ensure that the services that we have available are effective and that we do use the resources that we have wisely.
Now, before I take you too far into 2013, let's rewind back to 2012. Sure. You had several legislative successes at the end of the year, bills that were signed by the governor. In particular, one I know that is really a hallmark bill for California and really for the nation, your SB 9 dealing with the sentencing for juveniles who are are facing life terms, essentially. Tell us about that bill.
Well, that bill is a watershed for the rights of our kids and giving them a second chance. Unfortunately, in the state of California, we have the largest number of youngsters who are in prison for the rest of their life without the possibility of parole. They will die a natural death. And it's a sad commentary in our society that we're not going to give kids a second chance at life. And so what this bill would do is to give kids who are in prison without the possibility of parole now the possibility of that particular parole if they demonstrate that they have accepted responsibility, they have gotten their GED, maintained relationships with their family members, that there's strong indication that they're not going to re-offend.
And there's also Senate Bill 1001, which I know dealt with the increasing of the lobbying fees to bring further transparency and improve our setup here for our elections and all of that in California. Explain that.
We have a rather antiquated system, computer system, where we let people know who is donating to what campaign, how politicians are spending their dollars. And so by increasing the fees of the lobbyists, we now have additional revenues to enhance and modernize that particular computer system. Anything that we can do to increase transparency about how money is spent, how money is accumulated by politicians and other individuals is a good thing.
There's obviously a lot of bills that you have from last year. We could be here for half an hour talking about them, but finally one in particular which hit us particularly on the social media front was Senate Bill 1349, which prohibits private colleges and universities from accessing or demanding access to a student's social media accounts. Tell us about that.
You know, unfortunately what happens with technology is that we leave some of the core principles at the door and we don't incorporate them in our new technology. one of the new technology is in fact social media, and we also need to ensure that the social media content in our media accounts are in fact are protected, and that they are private, and that no one should have access to that information. So what the bill would do is to not only say to admission officers of colleges and universities, but also employers, that you cannot demand as a condition of acceptance into a particular university or getting a particular job that you have to reveal the password, the username of your social media account.
Now, looking back at 2012, that's obviously some of the things that happened or propelling legislation you have here for 2013. In particular, the news of 2012, towards the end of the year, the devastating shooting of the school children and their teachers in Connecticut has put a fire, if you will, under the debate about gun legislation, what we do with guns in our society, particularly assault weapons and semi-automatic weapons. You have reintroduced legislation, SB 47, that would put some limits on some of those semi-automatic weapons. Tell us about that bill.
Well, the shooting in Connecticut has changed this country. We can no longer just simply close our eyes to the fact that assault weapons ought not to be around, that we ought not to sell that particular weapon and put it in the hands of the wrong type of individuals. We cannot allow any young children to be killed and massacred. And so what my bill will do is to close a particular loophole in our assault weapon ban in the state of California, where easily exchangeable magazines of bullets can no longer exist in our assault weapon, and so that's what we're going to do.
And you tried this last year as well, correct?
That bill stalled in the Assembly Appropriation Committee. The committee staff and members said that it could be easily rectified. That loophole can in fact be closed by a order of the Attorney General. She has now indicated that she does not believe that to be the case, that she would in fact support a bill that will close that particular loophole. Ours is the bill. We're going to work together with her to make sure that that bill passed and signed by the governor.
And I understand you're also looking at considering legislation regarding safety requirements and the storage of weapons, correct?
That's absolutely true. You know, what we've got to do is to, you know, in the case where a weapon is not being used, that it ought not to be lying around, so that it has that other individuals have access to it, so it should be locked up. In addition, there should be a trigger lock to all the weapons, so that if in fact in some unforeseen situation where a gun or rifle is in fact out in the open at a home, that you still cannot have access to it because there's a trigger lock to that.
Let's unpack this a little bit just with some further discussion. There are those who obviously say that gun legislation, gun control legislation is only one leg of the stool, if you will, in discussing this and debating this, that there's also issues relating to mental health and even violent video games, which I know you have obviously been a key part of rectifying and curbing those. I mean, you're obviously a child psychologist. How does this make sense? How does this all weigh into this debate about this issue?
Well, with all complex issues, there's never one answer, but we've got to at least deal with all the different answers. And one of it is, in fact, the restriction of the sale of these assault weapons. With that said, as you indicate, we've got to look at our mental health system. And the head of our Senate, Darrell Steinberg, Senator Steinberg, has talked about, you know, how do we increase funding for mental health services? How do we utilize the services that we have right now a lot more effectively? Looking at violent video games, you know, we tried that particular bill. Unfortunately, we went to the U.S. Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court said that we could not, in fact, limit the sale of those particular games to children because of First Amendment issue. But that being said, we as parents and other individuals in our society have now a double responsibility, additional responsibility of making sure that our children are not going to spend hundreds and thousands of hours in a room just playing these video games where you literally are training yourself how to shoot and kill and massacre individuals.
2013, looking back to 2012, actually, we also saw how important it is for campaign funding to be transparent and in full view. And we saw that last year in the election, the general election, when a nonprofit that was based in Arizona gave $11 million to the opponents of Prop 30 and Prop 32 without disclosing who they were or where the money was coming from. And it was done in the dark, as they say, and a lot of time and money spent after the fact trying to figure out who this was that had donated this money from another state. You want to put a stop to this so-called dark money.
Absolutely. We've got to make sure that all elections in the state of California are held and conducted in an open fashion where people know who's running, how money is accumulated, and how money is being used. We've got a lot of laws that will ensure that open and transparency within the organizations of California. Unfortunately, as you indicate, last November, there was, in fact, an out-of-state organization that spent $11 million of campaign money to effectuate a race here in the state of California. When asked, where that money came from, how did it get here, who's behind that money, we were not told. And it's unfortunate that we finally had to go to court in order to get that information. And so what my bill will do is any money that's going to come from an outside entity that they have to disclose that information. Everybody should be knowing where money comes from, how it's accumulated, and what's going to be used for.
Was it the 2010 ruling by the U.S. Supreme Court on the Citizens United? Was that what was sort of the catalyst for this, for you having to put in this kind of stopgap, close the loophole kind of measure?
Absolutely. The reality is that we're all going to abide by individuals' ability to express themselves through the First Amendment and so on. But you also have a responsibility that you cannot accumulate a mass amount of money and try to then spend it and effectuate a race and not let people know where that money comes from.
It must be frustrating for you as a legislator. I mean, California has some of the toughest campaign finance laws in the United States, and yet here we are still in 2012, 2013, sort of plugging these loopholes. Is this going to pass constitutional muster? Do you think this is something that's going to be effective, or are there going to be people on the other side of it still trying to work their way around it and still get this money to campaigns, whether it's candidates or propositions, without letting the public know what's going on?
We've got a lot of smart individuals with fine minds who will be helping us draft this particular piece of legislation, and I think that it will pass muster of any particular challenge. Unfortunately, what happens oftentimes is that we've closed one loophole. There's an effort to try to do that, and what we've got to do is just stay one step ahead and to making sure that all the dollars that are available and used in elections are in fact open and transparent.
Well, notwithstanding the U.S. Supreme Court's ruling, is the federal government doing enough? Obviously not if you're introducing legislation on the state level. But
well, no, and it's unfortunate that Congress has not acted, on this particular issue. When all of us at the state level have to kind of clean up what's going on in Congress, that's rather unfortunate.
Let's take a look at voting itself, registration for voting, online even. Here we are in the 21st century. You are the author of new legislation here that opened up doors to online voting actually in the last election, but now you're sort of broadening it and making it more accessible in this year. First, let's talk about last year and the successes, the access to online registration and how that played out here in California.
Well, that also was a game changer piece of legislation. We've been for a number of years just kind of prodding along, increasing individuals' voter registration. And all of a sudden, we made it a lot easier. You can go online, register to vote, and that's been a good thing. Over 1 million individuals utilize this particular resource. Nearly 700,000 individuals are new voter. And so that we will capitalize on that initial success into this year, and so that we will look at all kinds of other state sites, state government sites, where we will then link them back to voter registration, and that's really, really important.
So essentially anybody could log on to any state agency site or even your site as a legislator, and there's access to registration.
That's right, or they will get information as to how to then do online voter registration. And so we want to get as many individuals in the state of California registered to vote as possible, because the more that we have, the better the public policy and the carrying out of legislation is going to be.
And obviously, the more people get out there and are compelled to vote when they actually are able to register that way.
Well, that's the other thing. You know, we hope that once you register to vote, then you will also then take that additional step of actually voting too.
Great. Senator, we barely scratched the surface of what you have ahead here for 2013. I hope we can invite you back to go more into the weeds on some of these issues as they become, gain new life in legislative committees and go through the process.
Absolutely, so, we would love to do that.
Yeah, thank you for being part. Good to talk to you again, as always.
Thank you very much.
Senator Leland Yee, Senator from the 8th District of California, representing San Francisco County and San Mateo counties. And that is the end of this edition of Senate Spotlight. So please join us next time around as we discuss the legislative issues and policy affecting California with the newsmakers and newsbreakers of the California State Senate. And from the state capitol in Sacramento, I'm Brian Green. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for watching Senate Spotlight.